So hello everybody, here I'm back with the Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and today I want to talk about chapters 2 and 3. The first one is The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh and the second one is Danger at Dunwater. So, as I said in my previous video, this book is a compilation of older adventures that are set in and around the town of Saltmarsh, but you can set it wherever you like. For each of these stories there is also a little sidebar that explains how you could put it somewhere else. If you were to place it in Eberron, where would it go? If you were to place it in the Forgotten Realms, where would it go? And of course, because it is set in Greyhawk. Now, the first adventure in this book is The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. And it says down here that it was originally published in 1981. And it was produced by the UK branch of TSR. And apparently the UK branch, I didn't know this, made adventures that were specifically targeted at the UK market and tended to have a little bit of a different approach to things. So this one apparently was the first one because it was the first one to sport a haunted house and also a raid on a sailing ship. And it says here that it set the tone for TSR UK's subsequent output, which often featured strong central narratives that challenged players to take a creative approach to problem solving. They usually included multiple smaller locations to explore, lending a sense of variety to a single adventure. And the difference becomes apparently quite clear, and it's also explained in the next adventure, because that one for the time was also very different. So essentially the story is of a haunted house. Depending on if the characters are natives of Saltmarsh or if they've just come in, what happens is they go to the haunted mansion. It's a decrepit, derelict house, some leagues north, I believe, of Saltmarsh. And it used to belong to an alchemist, and people have heard shrieking and blah, 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 and nobody wants to go there because it is haunted. So the idea is that your characters 4 to 6, level 1, go into it and start researching what's in there. However, what is actually happening is different from what people think is happening. So first of all, there are some undead, but they are not the main storyline. But the main storyline is that there are smugglers that use the house because it's set on a promontory and there is a basement, and if you go down into the basement it opens up into a cave, and this cave is open to the ocean, and basically there is a smuggler's ship that will bring contraband. And then the smugglers will pick it up in small jolly boats and then ferry it to the haunted house from where they're going to sell it. So the first part is really exploring the haunted house. They run into quite a lot of things like traps. They run into monsters. There are swarms of spiders. There are sturges. There are all kinds of things that you could find in a haunted house. Plus, there is also a couple of bandit smugglers. There is the alchemist's dead body. There are some skeletons. And then there's also Ned. And Ned is a double agent because Ned has been captured so that the heroes find him, free him, and then he will try and derail their investigation. There are also magic mouths, which are essentially alarm traps that when they are set off, tell everyone else that somebody's approaching. So depending on how the heroes fare, they may attract attention, they may not attract attention, and it's described quite easily and quite clearly in the book what happens if they do attract someone's attention, who moves where, and there will be a lot of fighting. I mean, it is an old school dungeon crawl after all, although the dungeon you're crawling through is a haunted house. However, they find out about this smuggling operation, and they can also find the signaling table, which explains, short, long, what that means, and that they can attract the ship. They then are supposed to go back and report back to the Council of Saltmarsh and tell them about it, and the council will give them a boat that they can use so that they can approach the ship. And then in the second part, they will hopefully manage to get onto the ship and get rid of all of the smugglers on board. There are pirates, and again there will be a lot of fighting. There are quite a lot of enemies there. But they will also encounter 3 lizard folk that have a little cabin on the ship. They will also be fighting them. They have a pseudo dragon with them that will bond with one of the characters, and I find that really cute. And essentially, they will find weapons. And it turns out that the smugglers were not only bringing contraband like silk, etc., into the city, or the town really, and selling it from there, or smuggling it inland, but they were running weapons to the lizard folk. And we find out where the lizard folk live. So when they go back and tell the council about it, the council says, okay, you should totally go and check out what's going on with the lizard folk. And that is the second adventure, Danger at Dunwater. When the characters, and the idea is really to play it as a whole campaign. So of course you can also drop them in at Danger at Dunwater, but then they should be 4 to 6 characters of level 3. And then they can go into that lizard folk hideout, as it were. And again, I would like to read from the byline about the original. Doubling down on TSR UK's penchant for exploration and interaction in their work, this scenario challenges the characters to act as ambassadors to a colony of lizard folk. While such roleplay-focused adventures are the norm today, at the time of its publication in 1982, this adventure was the first to make interaction an absolute requirement of success rather than one option among many, because what the DM knows but the players don't is that, yes, the lizard folk are collecting weapons. The people in Saltmarsh believe that the lizard folk want to assault Saltmarsh, which is not true. They have been attacked by these folk and thrown out of their natural abode and habitat, and they have now made their home in some cave formation somewhere, and they know that these guys are going to come after them, and they also want to be ready and want to take the war to them. These folk are also going to attack humans, by the way. They are a real danger. And so the idea is that they all have it backwards. They believe that the lizard folk are trying to attack Saltmarsh, when actually the lizard folk are preparing for an attack on a common enemy, just an enemy that has not attacked Saltmarsh so far and hasn't even reared its ugly head. So the idea is that they go there in order to find out what is going on. And they should earn the trust of the lizard folk and then end up forging an alliance with their queen. And that is a very interesting thing. However, and I will say this right up front, I think the idea is great, but I wouldn't play it like it is written in here, because the book, the story itself, when we look at it, is actually, all of this is a large dungeon crawl. You have this dungeon to go through. The idea is that when they see you, they talk to you. Most of you won't speak Draconic, and if nobody speaks Draconic, talking to them will be almost impossible. They have just suffered at the hands of their enemy, so they don't really want to fight. But of course, if they tell someone, leave now or we will kill you because we don't want you here, and they don't know what's happening, and somebody's brandishing swords at the heroes will probably take exception to this and will fight back. And so I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, because if they don't have any common language, just using sign language, which is, this is my sword, it's bigger than yours, is probably not going to work. So I see that this is a little bit, I'm not sure, because then they resolve this by doing charisma rolls, which isn't really role playing. You're just basically rolling, and oh yeah, my charisma check was good, so they don't kill me. So I think this would have to be played slightly differently. I mean, it says that some of them can speak common, but most of the ones that you will find probably can't. So I'm not quite sure how this would work. And also I'm not quite sure how the fact that you're supposed to go through all of this and then you can find treasure, you collect the treasure. Of course you do, because it's Dungeons and Dragons. So I don't think that this switch of thinking would work for the characters so easily. So I think this would have to be done slightly differently. And it also says, you know, that if they don't collect enough brownie points, as it were, they can still, for example, go on a croc hunt, because there is a huge alligator that is an enemy of these lizard folk. And if you kill them, if you kill that one, then you get additional bonus points, as it were. And if all else fails, and if the alliance cannot be forged because they have been behaving so badly, or maybe they have even killed the queen, and they return, then of course, you know, the Saltmarsh Council will go, oh yeah, great, you destroyed our enemy. But then at the same time, the Merfolk, and I don't know if the Merfolk are the same as the lizard folk, or if they are different, because it suddenly switches from lizard folk to Merfolk. So I don't know if this is the same group and they just decided to call them something else, which would be weird, or if it's a different group of people entirely. Tell them about these guys, and they've got such a weird name, Sagwine. I don't know, I mean, I just call them deep ones because that's what they look like. They look like deep ones from Lovecraft. Are preparing for an attack, and they've just attacked the lizard folk and have almost killed them, and now the lizard folk are in distress even more because the heroes have attacked them, and basically they would like an alliance with Saltmarsh against the deep ones. And then of course everything is resolved. So even if the characters mess up completely, the alliance is still forged. So yes, I can understand that, but it's also kind of like a fail-safe. So if all goes wrong, then, you know, you can still have the alliance, which I think is important for the next part of the story. So I think it kind of needs to be played differently. And I would also not say that in order to forge an alliance, you go into someone's house, because this is essentially their house. And every time you encounter somebody, you just hope that, you know, for a charisma roll, nothing happens, but you just basically walk around in their house. That's weird. If I wanted to find out something without them seeing me, I would actually hide and try to smuggle myself in, which of course is impossible because there are too many. Or I would go there and say, take me to your leader, we have to talk. But then again, the big question is, why would they have to talk? Because they also have the idea already that these guys are preparing for war. So going there would mean, okay, I'm going there thinking I'm going to meet my enemy and say, okay, we know that you're collecting weapons. We don't want you to use them on us. What can we do to resolve this? And hope that they don't get killed, because obviously they're approaching a deadly enemy. Or try to find out more about it. But then, of course, this is a bit difficult to pull off in this huge area, because they will be discovered. There is no way they can go in there and not be discovered. So while I like the idea, I think this whole idea of going as ambassadors into a great dungeon is a bit weird. And I don't think I would play it like this. I would take the idea, but I would present it differently. However, if you just decide to leave all of the politics out of it and just play this as a plain dungeon crawl, and you don't care left, right, and center if they make friends and if they collect brownie points, but it's just, oh, raid the dungeon of these lizard folk, which you could do. I mean, you can just put this in if you happen to be by the seaside and you want to give your adventurers some R&R, some treasure, and some exercise. It's a really well laid out dungeon. It's interesting. It doesn't have many traps. It doesn't have any secret doors, I think, but it's got plenty of enemies. So it really depends on how you play it. But of course, we also have to accept that this one is 40 years old. It was released in 1981. Today is 2021. So obviously, the way we play today is not the way we used to play. But that doesn't invalidate it. It just means that even when it's converted to 5e and even when it's put into this whole campaign story, you might have to adjust it because it doesn't lend itself, in my opinion, to this whole ambassadorial story that is being told. The narrative doesn't really work, as it were, with the framework in which it is presented. So that's chapters 2 and 3. And this is then directly followed by the salvage operation. Sorry, this is then followed by the next adventure, if you're playing it as a series, which is called The Final Enemy. So I'm not quite sure why they didn't present it in this order, because it builds on the Sinister, Secret of Saltmarsh and Danger at Dunwater. So I would have actually expected them to place this as chapter 3, because then you have like a continuous story in the book as well. I don't know why they didn't do it. So that's the one I'm going to discuss next. So until next time, as it were, talk to you soon. And yeah, The Ghost of Saltmarsh. Bye bye.